And that was very good for him, you know what I mean? And everybody was envious, as I would be naturally at the time. But in reality now, obviously, I wouldn't trade it with him. Rest in peace.
For weeks, Mulholland Drive stayed dead quiet after a heartbreak that rattled Hollywood to its bones. The silence wasn't just awkward. It was heavy, hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. A space once alive with laughter and late-night lights now felt empty, shaped by the sudden absence of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. People waited, holding their breath for any sign, a statement, a glimpse, anything, from the couple who once defined the canyon's rhythm. The headlines kept spinning wild theories. Sources whispered half-truths, and emotional tributes poured in, each one deepening the mystery behind their silence. But from the one man who ruled that hill, the legend himself, Jack Nicholson, there was nothing. No cheeky one-liners, no close friends leaking details to the press, no mysterious online posts. Jack stayed completely still, untouched by the chaos. He never let the world rush him. He lived life like a movie he directed himself, cool, calculated, always on his own timeline. So when word broke that Jack was finally ready to talk, everyone knew it wouldn't be some flashy media circus. No cameras, no lights, no agents hovering, just Jack, a tape recorder, and that famous grin in the soft glow of his dimly lit living room. The sun was slipping behind the hills, painting long golden shadows across the canyon he'd called home for decades.
That I was all I was, and so were all the people I was working with, trying to do their best under the circumstances. And that's really all you need as a developing actor, is just to be trying to do it well.
He was rather a nice, very mild gentleman, someone once said. And they weren't wrong. His house, more like a museum of memories, carried stories in every corner. Art, laughter, heartbreak, all locked up tight like secrets only he could keep. He sat there, shades on, not to hide, but because they'd become part of who he was. His face, carved by time, looked sharp, like a man who'd seen it all and wasn't afraid to remember. The familiar lines on his face seemed deeper now, carved by something heavier than fame itself. Jack lifted his glass, the ice clicking gently like a quiet metronome, counting the beats between thoughts. The pause that followed wasn't empty. It meant something. It carried weight, tension, and maybe even a little pain. This wasn't small talk anymore. This was a confession from a man who had seen too much. When he finally spoke, his voice came out low and rough, dragging through the silence like gravel under slow tires. Every word landed with precision, chosen carefully, slicing through the noise and gossip swirling around Hollywood's favorite mystery. The papers, the television, they go on and on about Rob, he said, steady but loaded with something deeper. The director, the guy who made Stand By Me, the man behind The Princess Bride. A faint, humorless smile tugged at his lips as he added, "They talk about Meathead." The nickname rolled off with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. "They get that part right," he said after a long breath, the weight of old memories thickening the air. "I guess that's what everyone knows. The headlines, the awards, the legacy stuff. That's the public record." His tone dropped even lower. "But they don't know him. They never heard the silence in the room when Rob was deep in thought, wrestling with something that kept him up at night." He shook his head slightly. "They never caught his real laugh, not the one for the cameras, the real one. That full, booming laugh that could wipe away every worry in the room for a second. Like, ain't this all a kick in the head?" Then Jack leaned forward, setting his glass down with a sharp thud that cracked through the stillness. In that instant, it felt like the entire room split, before and after that sound. "And they sure don't know what it meant to be his friend," Jack muttered, the words carrying more weight than the walls around him could hold. His voice cracked just slightly, eyes flashing behind those dark lenses as the air in the room seemed to shift. Heavy, electric, real. This wasn't just nostalgia anymore. It was raw emotion, unfiltered and alive. "That's the story, isn't it?" he said quietly. "Not the Hollywood icon everyone worships, but the father. The father who cared so deeply for his son that he couldn't see what was really happening right in front of him." He paused, taking a slow, unsteady breath, his voice dropping low, almost like he was talking to himself now.
I didn't have any real problems with him, and I don't really there was a substitute male figure in the house. I have older sisters and married. And I
Or maybe he did see it and loved him anyway. The line hung there, trembling in the silence. I can't even say which is worse, he admitted, his tone cracking open something deep and human. For a moment, even the canyon outside seemed to go still, like the hills themselves were listening to Jack Nicholson speak the kind of truth people usually keep buried. He continued, "This is a story about that love and about what comes from it. The kind of truth only someone close enough to witness both sides could ever tell." His voice hardened slightly, cutting through the quiet. The connection between Jack Nicholson and Rob Reiner wasn't born from fame, money, or Hollywood's phony handshakes. No! Their bond was something built over time, in silence, in trust, in mutual understanding that didn't need to be said out loud. They didn't build their friendship under red carpet lights or at some star-studded after-party. It was forged like iron under heat during one of the most legendary scenes in movie history. The year was 1992. The film, A Few Good Men. The courtroom showdown that made audiences hold their breath wasn't just acting. It was two men locked into a rhythm only true respect could create. "People forget," Jack said, eyes drifting far beyond the room as if the memory played out on a distant screen. Rob was an actor first. His tone softened, almost tender now. "That's the key to everything." He leaned back slowly, lost somewhere between then and now. He wasn't one of those directors who stands behind the camera barking orders like a traffic cop. No, he felt the moment with you. He lived it right there beside you. Nah, Rob lived in the moment with you. Jack's tone lifted, crackling with that unmistakable charge of respect and memory. He understood what it felt like to stare at a blank page, wondering if the words would soar or fall flat on their face. He gave a slow nod, his voice deepening. He knew that rush and that fear that crawls up your spine, and the guts it takes to stand there completely exposed with the whole world watching. Most directors, they just sit back, detached, calling shots from behind the camera like traffic cops with clipboards. But Rob? No, Rob was right there in it with you. Jack's grin spread wide, that classic sly Nicholson grin flashing for a heartbeat as his mind drifted back to that legendary moment. Colonel Jessup's volcanic outburst in A Few Good Men. That monologue, Jack said, shaking his head, was pure tension, like holding a grenade and waiting for the pin to drop. The pressure was unreal, the kind that squeezes your lungs until you forget to breathe. The script, written by a young, fired-up Aaron Sorkin, was a storm of sharp dialogue. Every line, Jack said, eyes flickering with life, was a weapon. It could slice clean or miss completely. They ran that scene over and over, new angles, tighter coverage, shifting reactions, each take a dance between chaos and control. Tom Cruise, Jack chuckled, was pure lightning, bouncing around with all that righteous energy. And there I was, sitting in that chair, that uniform practically boiling. He laughed lightly, remembering the rhythm of those takes, the heat, the silence between words, the charge in the air. "Rob let me sit in that fire," he said, almost proudly. He trusted it. Between takes, Rob didn't bark notes or over-explain like most directors. He'd just stroll over, lean in close, lock eyes, and say something small, so quiet, precise. "He really thinks he's the hero," Jack recalled, his voice dipping into that deep, steady register. Jack paused, his mouth tightening as if he could still hear it echo. "That's all it took," he said softly.
So no, I would say I had I would say, throughout I've had a fairly easy life, really.
That one line flipped everything. It changed the entire energy in the room. He never forgot it. That's what Rob said, and that was it. His tone gentled, almost reverent now. He wasn't just directing lines. He was directing the soul of the scene. Then Jack leaned back, a shadow of emotion crossing his face. His voice lowered to a near whisper, the kind you use when talking about a memory that never really leaves you. And for the first time, he shared a story no one had ever heard before. No one had ever heard this story before. A quiet, powerful moment that happened behind the camera, tucked away from all the lights and noise. Jack's eyes narrowed as if the memory was unfolding right there in front of him. It was after a brutal take, he said slowly. The crew was moving around, resetting lights, shifting cables, the usual chaos between shots. And then, out of nowhere, Rob just walked over, not to his mark, not to check the monitor, but straight to me. I was off to the side, Jack said, cigarette in hand, just trying to catch my breath. He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. He stood next to me for a minute, didn't say a word, just stood there. The stillness in his voice carried the weight of that moment, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any line in a script. Then, after a long beat, Jack's tone dropped low, almost like a whisper. After a while, he says, "My old man Carl once told me the funniest people are always the saddest." Jack's expression shifted, thoughtful. And then he added, "I think the scariest people are the most certain." The line hit like a soft punch to the gut, hanging in the air, heavy and electric. Jack nodded slightly, remembering. He was talking about Colonel Jessup, sure, he said, but really, he was talking about something bigger. The danger of believing too hard, of being too sure you're right. That moment changed everything between them. The movie talk stopped. The walls of Hollywood dropped. It wasn't actor and director anymore. It was just two men standing there, peeling back the layers of what it means to be human. Jack took a deep breath, his tone filled with quiet respect. "That's when I knew," he said, "this wasn't just a gig for him. Rob was chasing truth through every frame he shot. From that day on, their friendship locked in tight. It became something real, built on trust, honesty, and difference. Two total opposites drawn together by that shared hunger for truth. Reiner, the warm, big-hearted Hollywood liberal born into comedy royalty, and Jack, the cool, guarded icon who wore mystery like a second skin. And Nicholson, the private, unpredictable rebel from Jersey," Jack said with a half-smile, his tone carrying both pride and melancholy. "But we connected, you know. Really connected," he chuckled softly. "We'd grab lunch. Not at Musso and Frank's, where every camera in town waits to catch a glimpse, but at some quiet spot nobody cared about. Sometimes we'd just talk on the phone for hours." His grin softened, his voice lowering like a man slipping into memory. "We'd talk about the Lakers, about politics, about getting older, but mostly..." He paused. "We talked about our kids." His face shifted, the warmth in his voice dimming under the glow of memory like old film burning at the edges. "That was it for him," Jack said, his words careful, heavy with meaning.
You look at him with his head kind of shaved, and I don't know if that's what he looked like, but he looks like he's got a screw, or an evil screw. So he was 32 years old. He was at a holiday party hosted by Conan O'Brien.
That was the center of his world. The room seemed to shrink around him as he spoke. He was so proud of Jake and Romy, Jack said softly. He loved their spark, their drive, the way they carved their own paths without needing anyone's permission. Jack's eyes flickered with something tender. He'd talk about them with this shine in his eyes, that look only a father gets. It was real. It was pure. For a moment, his tone carried warmth again. But then it shifted, dropping low, somber. The air itself seemed to change. But when he talked about Nick, Jack trailed off, his voice thinning into a hush. The light changed. He leaned back, steady but emotional, choosing his words carefully. "It wasn't less love, not at all. If anything, it was more. But it carried a weight, a kind of worried love, the kind that keeps you up at night, wondering, hoping, fearing." He stared off, eyes fixed on something far beyond the room, like he was watching ghosts move across the canyon. "I've been around this town a long time," he finally said, his voice tightening with age and truth. "I've seen it all, the highs, the heartbreaks." His jaw set slightly, the gravel in his tone sharpening. "I've seen the kids of famous people rise up and make it big, but I've also seen others lose themselves, chasing shadows, chasing names, chasing ghosts of their parents' legends." His words hung in the air like smoke, heavy, honest, and impossible to ignore. "This town can mess you up if you're not careful," Jack said, voice gravelly, each word hitting with quiet force. The access, the attention, the easy comfort, it's all like a slow poison. He took a long, steady breath, eyes distant. You let it in without even knowing, and before long, it owns you. His tone softened, carrying a flicker of pain. Rob wasn't blind to it. He knew the risks. He and Michelle, they did everything right. Real family dinners, weekend trips, small moments that actually mattered. They wanted their kids to stay grounded, stay real. He paused, letting the stillness stretch. They showed up every single time, he said quietly. They were good parents, really good parents. His voice cracked slightly, then steadied again. But sometimes, he continued, no matter how strong your walls are, that poison still finds a way in. It slips through the cracks when no one's looking. The memory pressed down on the room, thick and heavy. The day the news hit, Jack's tone dropped to almost a whisper. I was home. He stopped, swallowed hard. The phone rang. Sharp, too loud for how quiet the house was. He took a breath that trembled just a little. It wasn't an agent, it wasn't a publicist. It was a friend, someone close. His voice faltered barely above a whisper. They could hardly get the words out, just this broken, breathless sound on the other end of the line. He shook his head slowly, eyes fixed somewhere far away. You don't process something like that, he murmured. The sound of his words was barely more than breath. You just go still. The silence stretched, aching. The words came through the phone like static, like broken, unreal. He paused, eyes closing for a second. Rob and Michelle, found in the house with Nick. Jack repeated the words again, softer this time, almost like he was trying to convince himself they'd never been said. At first, it doesn't even make sense, he said, shaking his head. Your mind refuses to put it together because the picture it paints, it can't be real. His tone hardened, distant and low. It goes against everything you believe should ever happen. For a long moment, Jack said nothing. When he finally spoke again, his voice was almost hollow. It wasn't grief, he said slowly. Grief comes in waves. This was something else. It was a void, like someone opened a door and all the air just rushed out of the room. His words hung there, raw, final, and echoing with the weight of loss that had no name. Jack let the silence stretch, long, heavy, and unbroken, before his voice returned, low and cracked. I hung up the phone, he said, and walked out onto the deck. His eyes drifted somewhere far away, reliving it.
Nick was living in his family's guest house at the time. He was found late Sunday afternoon by his sister, Romy. Both parents were discovered having been stabbed.
The whole city was laid out below me. Los Angeles, buzzing and bright, completely unaware. He took a breath that sounded like it hurt. Cars were still streaming down the freeway. A helicopter slicing through the air, the sun blazing like nothing had happened. He paused, staring at the floor. And I remember thinking, how? How can life just keep going? How can everything move like nothing changed when your whole world has stopped? His tone hardened, a faint tremor of anger beneath the sadness. That's the cruelest part of it, he said sharply. The world doesn't pause for your pain. It doesn't even blink. Jack didn't rush to turn on the TV or scroll through news sites. I already knew what was waiting, he said bitterly, his jaw clenched as he looked down. The circus, the speculation, the gossip, the vultures circling, headlines written by people who never knew them, pretending to care while picking the story apart for clicks. He exhaled hard, the bitterness thick in his voice. I wanted no part of it. So he disappeared, slipped into the stillness of his house. The same home that once echoed with laughter and wild nights now sat dead quiet. The kind of quiet that holds ghosts in its walls. I couldn't stop thinking about Michelle, he said, and this time his voice cracked, just barely but real. She was always the steady one, the calm in every storm. He stopped again, swallowing hard. Rob, he continued softly, he was the big, loud heart of that family. His eyes shimmered faintly, the light catching the emotion he couldn't hide anymore. But Michelle, She was its soul. His tone turned reverent, almost a whisper. She was pure grace and steel. Jack's voice softened, but the weight behind it didn't. She had that quiet kind of strength, the kind that holds everything together when the world's falling apart. He paused, jaw tightening as the thought hit him again. I can't even imagine, he muttered, voice trembling at the edge, what they went through in those final moments. His words trailed off, leaving only the sound of his breathing, slow, uneven, and haunted by everything left unsaid. That's the one that never leaves you, Jack said, his tone low and rough, almost a growl. It creeps in when everything else is quiet. That kind of darkness you can't face head on. His words hung in the air, thick as smoke. As the shocking details started spilling out, the city couldn't stop buzzing. The press twisting every headline, the internet turning grief into gossip. Aaron Sorkin even spoke out, his voice cracking with heartbreak during an interview. But Jack's hidden. No statements, no cameras, just silence. Heavy, intentional silence. I wasn't thinking like an actor, he said finally, shaking his head. I was just a man trying to make sense of how I lost a friend and wondering if I missed something I should have seen. His eyes clouded, the weight of regret etched deep in his face. He took a slow breath, then added softly, there was a moment, something that's haunted me since. Maybe that's why I'm talking now. His tone deepened, more personal, the kind that drags truth out whether you want it or not. It was a few years back, Jack said. Rob's birthday. They were throwing a party at the house in Brentwood. He smiled faintly, remembering. Beautiful night, soft breeze, music playing, the smell of good food in the air. The place was packed. Family, old friends, studio folks. Even Carl was there, sharp as ever, telling stories that had everyone laughing till they cried. Jack's smile flickered again, then faded just as quickly. It felt perfect, he said quietly. He paused, eyes tightening. I was out in the garden chatting with someone when I saw Nick walk in. His tone shifted, darker now, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Jack stopped, letting the memory build like a storm behind his eyes. I've seen that look before, he said finally. On sets, in bars, even staring back at me in the mirror when I was younger. He took a breath, deep and uneven. It's that restless kind of anger, he went on, voice rough with memory. The kind that doesn't know where to go, but it's looking for somewhere to land. His words carried the chill of someone who'd been there, who knew exactly what that kind of fire could do if it wasn't caught in time. Jack's voice dropped low, steady but uneasy, like he was walking a thin wire between memory and regret. He wasn't out of it, Jack said slowly. Not in the usual way. He wasn't drunk or loud or stumbling. It was something deeper, something you could feel more than see, like the wires inside him were sparking wrong. An imbalance in the spirit, if that makes any sense. He leaned back, rubbing his hands together slowly, the motion almost grounding him as he spoke. Later that night, Jack continued, his eyes drifting somewhere distant, I went inside to grab another drink. He paused, breath catching for a second.
Nick was at the Conan O'Brien holiday party the night before, Saturday, December 13th. He was there with his father. He was acting erratic by all accounts, and he was loudly arguing with his father.
And what I saw next, I can't ever unsee it. His tone cracked slightly, then steadied. The main party was outside. Laughter, music, glasses clinking, all that happy noise drifting through the night air. But from inside the house, he hesitated. I heard something different. It was faint at first. Raised voices cutting through the laughter like glass breaking. Jack froze in the hallway, the sound sharp and raw. Something about the tone. He said quietly, pulled me closer. He swallowed, voice low. It was Nick and Rob. Jack's brow furrowed as the scene replayed in his mind. Nick had him cornered, not physically, but with his energy. He was standing over his dad, who was sitting in a chair, just taking it. Jack's voice trembled with the memory. And Nick's voice, man, it was dripping with anger. All that resentment, all that blame, just pouring out. He shook his head. Money, fame, life, every frustration you could imagine, all coming out at once. He paused, eyes narrowing. But the way he said it, the venom in it, it was hard to hear. His voice softened then, the tension still etched across his face. Then Michelle walked in. Jack exhaled, his tone shifting again, gentler now. She had this look, calm, steady, like she'd seen it before and knew she had to cool it down. He smiled faintly, the kind of sad smile that comes from remembering someone's grace under pressure. She stepped right between them, didn't raise her voice, didn't make a scene. She just put her hand gently on Nick's arm and said his name. He stopped, looking down as he whispered, just his name. The room fell silent for a moment. The weight of that single act, that quiet, desperate love, hanging heavy in the air. With that unbelievable softness she had, Jack said, pausing as the memory flickered behind his eyes like an old reel of film. She just said his name, calm as ever. And he brushed her off. Jack's voice dropped to almost a growl. Not violently, but with this small, sharp motion that said everything. He leaned forward, rubbing his hands together. It wasn't about force. It was about disrespect. And it cut through me, man. He took a deep, shaky breath, his shoulders tightening. Then he looked at them, both of them, his parents, the two people who had given him everything, and there was nothing in his eyes, no warmth, no connection, just this cold emptiness. Jack's words slowed, heavy and deliberate. It was like watching a storm roll through a person. His head shook slowly, the memory still raw, like staring into something that wasn't even human anymore, just hollow. His voice cracked, quiet but sharp enough to slice through the silence. Rob noticed me standing in the doorway. He whispered. Our eyes met, maybe for a second, maybe less. But in that second, I saw everything, the shame, the fear, the heartbreak, and under all of it, that bottomless kind of love that only a father can have. His voice trembled now. The kind that refuses to give up, no matter what. Jack's eyes glistened, the emotion rising to the surface. He gave me the smallest shake of his head, he said, barely above a whisper, like he was saying, don't. Just let it be. It meant, let it go, Jack. It's okay. This is us, our problem. Jack swallowed hard, voice trembling. So I did. I turned around, walked back out into that garden, and acted like I hadn't seen a damn thing. He stopped, jaw tight, the silence pressing down like a weight. That's my biggest regret, he said finally, voice raw. The one that doesn't fade. He exhaled hard, the sound shaky, and slowly pulled off his sunglasses. His eyes were red, tired, lined with pain that went way beyond loss, the kind that only guilt can carve into a man's face. I thought I was respecting his privacy, Jack said softly. I thought I was honoring his faith that things could get better. He looked down, his voice nearly breaking. But what I should have done, what I wish I had done, was grab him by the shoulders and tell him straight. His hand hit the table with a dull thud. Tell him that silence doesn't save anyone, that sometimes love means stepping in, even when you're not wanted. His breathing hitched, his voice trailing into quiet. But I didn't, he said finally, almost to himself, and I'll carry that forever. Rob, hope isn't a plan, love isn't a shield. Jack's words came out slow, heavy, like every syllable hurt to say. There's something in your son that you can't just talk away.
Rob Reiner and Nick got into a, quote, very loud argument. His behavior at Conan's house alarmed the guests because it was so bizarre. One of the guests recalled Rob Reiner telling his son his behavior was inappropriate.
He paused, the weight of the truth pressing down on him like a physical force. The silence that followed felt endless. But I didn't, he admitted finally, voice cracking. Because who am I to tell another man how to handle his own family? Who am I to tell a father to stop believing in his kid? He sighed, long and tired, and leaned back. His hands trembled slightly as he slid his sunglasses on again. A small, careful move to pull himself back together, to hide the storm behind his eyes. Aaron said he'd seen something, too, Jack continued after a moment, his tone a little steadier now. Doesn't surprise me. I bet a dozen of us did. We all saw the smoke rising, but we told ourselves it wasn't fire. His jaw tightened. We said, he's just figuring things out. He'll be fine. Jack let out a short, hollow laugh that sounded more like a sigh. We did it out of love, out of respect for Rob. He shook his head slowly, bitterness creeping into his voice. But all we really did was help him hang on to a hope that turned out to be deadly. The room went still again. Jack's voice hardened, the guilt in it edged with anger, not just at fate, but at himself, at Hollywood, at the system that looks the other way until it's too late. That hope, he muttered, that's what destroyed everything. The conversation drifted toward the present, the aftermath, the endless coverage, the court case that turned tragedy into spectacle. Jack's tone lowered. Nick Reiner's sitting in county right now, he said quietly. Charged with 2 counts. First degree. Trial set for January. He stopped there, the silence between his words sharp enough to sting. After a moment, Jack scoffed softly. Not from amusement, but disbelief. Justice, he said, tasting the word like it was poison. They keep saying that word like it means something. His voice turned flat, almost cold. But tell me, how do you get justice for something like this? He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his expression hard but hollow. What even is justice here? Jack asked quietly. You lock the kid away forever? Throw away the key? And then what? His voice dropped to a murmur. You put him on trial, maybe even sentence him. And for what? He stared off for a long second, the fire dimming in his eyes. It doesn't bring them back, he said finally. It doesn't fix anything. It just leaves more ghosts behind. It doesn't bring Rob or Michelle back, Jack said quietly, his voice thin with grief. It doesn't heal the wound. It doesn't erase the horror. He exhaled slowly, and the sound broke halfway through. It's just numbers, accounting, trying to balance a ledger that'll never make sense. The silence after that line stretched long, almost sacred. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, gentler, the edge replaced by sorrow. Now I keep thinking about Romy and Jake, he said, eyes heavy. The ones left behind, the ones who have to wake up every single day and keep living. His face tightened, pride and heartbreak pulling in 2 directions. I read what they wrote, he said, his tone warming slightly. Their statement, how they focused on love and memory, how they refused to tear down their brother, even after everything. Jack shook his head slowly, almost in awe. That's Rob and Michelle right there, he said with quiet conviction. That's them. That's how they raised their kids. His voice softened again, emotion bubbling just under the surface. Behind the tinted lenses, his eyes shimmered. In the middle of something unthinkable, in the middle of a black hole of pain and betrayal, their first instinct was grace. He leaned forward slightly, the movement small but full of weight. They're protecting what's left of their family's light, he said, his words landing softly, trying not to let one terrible act erase a lifetime of love. His tone deepened, reverent. That's strength. That's love. The purest, hardest kind. Jack went quiet again, staring out through the window where Los Angeles blurred into a hazy gold afternoon. The city looked alive, but far away, untouchable. Maybe, he said finally, his voice slow and thoughtful, that's the only kind of justice you ever really get. He turned his head slightly, the late light flickering across his face, that the good they put into the world, it doesn't die.
And they know that feel he's not in his right mind. There is a report that he suffers from schizophrenia.
He pointed toward the skyline, his voice soft but sure. It keeps going. It lives in the kids who didn't fall apart. It lives in the movies, the ones that'll still make people laugh and cry long after we're gone. He paused, his gaze fixed somewhere just beyond the horizon. It lives in the memories of the people who really knew them, he said quietly. The ones who still feel them, in every sunset, every laugh, every echo of who they were. For a long time, Jack said nothing more, just sat there, the city humming beneath him, holding on to a silence that felt almost like peace. Who knew the man behind the camera and the woman who kept his world steady? Jack said softly, almost to himself. Then he fell quiet again. The city stretched endlessly below him. A glowing reminder that life, no matter how shattered, always keeps moving. The air felt heavier now, thick with that kind of silence that carries more truth than words ever could. The recorder kept running, a faint red light blinking, picking up the low hum of the house and the distant rush of cars winding through the canyon. Jack didn't seem to notice anymore. This wasn't an interview now, not really. It was just an old friend sitting in his living room trying to make sense of everything that was gone. The last time I talked to him, Jack said after a long pause, was maybe a month before it all happened. His voice dipped into a hush. Just a phone call, nothing special. He gave a small shrug, the kind that hides more than it shows. We were talking about the Lakers, about some dumb movie trailer. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. The usual back and forth, nothing that seemed to matter. He stopped for a moment, his gaze distant, drifting somewhere far beyond the walls around him. But then he got quiet, Jack said, his tone softening, almost tender. Just for a moment, he blinked slowly as if replaying the sound of that silence. And then he said, "You know, Jack, for all the craziness, we did all right, didn't we? We got to make movies. We got to tell stories. It's a pretty good life." Jack's lips pressed into a small, sad smile. And I said, "Yeah, Rob, it is." He exhaled, the memory catching in his throat. Then we hung up. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Jack stood slowly, his movements careful, almost ceremonial. He walked toward the wide window that stretched across the room, the city sprawling endlessly below, a sea of light and memory. His back was to the room now, the skyline burning gold as the sun began to sink. His reflection flickered faintly in the glass. One man standing against an endless city that had given him everything and taken just as much in return. The faint hum of traffic carried up from the canyon, blending with the soft hiss of wind against the glass. Jack didn't speak again. He just stood there, watching the city breathe beneath him, a man caught between the glow of what was and the shadow of what would never be again. The silence stretched again, long and endless, until only the soft hum of the city filled the space. When Jack finally spoke, his voice came muffled through the window glass, low and rough around the edges. He always looked for the good in people, he said quietly. That's what made his films so special. He turned slightly, his reflection faint in the glass. He made stories about the underdogs, about friendship, about love that actually meant something. Jack's voice caught just slightly, a flicker of emotion breaking through his usual control. He believed in happy endings, he said, really believed in them. For a moment, the light from the setting sun hit his face, and it showed everything. The lines, the years, the weight of loss that no fame could erase. He looked tired, but still standing. That was Rob's gift, Jack said, his tone tightening with pride and pain all tangled together. That's what made him an artist, that faith in people, that belief that no matter how bad things got, they'd find a way through. He paused, letting the words hang, the emotion sinking into the room. Then his face hardened, eyes narrowing as something darker moved behind them. But that same faith, he added softly, was also what broke him. He looked down, voice dropping low, almost to a whisper, because he couldn't stop believing it, even when it was killing him. Jack exhaled, his jaw tightening as he looked out again toward the horizon. He spent his whole life directing heroes and shaping villains on the big screen, he said, voice rough, full of gravel and sorrow. But the real heartbreak, the cruel twist.
And that was very good for him. You know what I mean? And everybody was envious, as I would be naturally at the time. But in reality now, obviously, I wouldn't trade it with him. Rest in peace.
Is that he never realized. He stopped, eyes darkening. That the villain wasn't some shadow out in the world. Jack's voice slowed to a crawl. It was right there, under his own roof, his own blood. The words landed like a gut punch, heavy and final. His jaw clenched, the muscle in his cheek twitching as he forced out the last line. And that's a truth nobody can carry, he said, voice almost breaking. Not fully, not a father, not anyone. The sentence hung in the air. sharp, devastating, and absolute. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, a stillness so deep it seemed to swallow the room whole, leaving nothing but the echo of his truth lingering like smoke in the dim light. That's when it becomes clear. The interview's over. No dramatic sign-off, no final question, no handshake for the cameras, just a quiet nod. A flicker of something unreadable passes through Jack's eyes. A silent, wordless, that's enough. As the door clicks shut behind the reporter, the last image lingers like a photograph burned into memory. Jack Nicholson, legend, survivor, the last echo of Hollywood's golden age, standing alone in his house above the city. He's surrounded by shadows that aren't make-believe, not the ghosts of the roles he's played, but something far more human. The ghost of a friend he couldn't save. The silence from Mulholland Drive returns once more, but this time it's different. It isn't empty anymore. It's heavy, heavy with memory, with everything that was finally spoken out loud. It's the kind of silence that doesn't hurt. It haunts. The silence of a story buried too long that has at last found its voice. Night has fallen over the canyon. The glow of Los Angeles sprawls below, distant, unreal, like a galaxy of moving lights that couldn't care less about the secrets whispered in its shadows. The city hums, alive and indifferent, as Jack's house grows darker, the air thicker with something electric, like confession still clinging to the walls. The recorder sits silent on the oak table. The tiny red light is dead now, but the air in the room still feels alive, charged, humming, like the echo of truth that refuses to fade. Outside, the wind moves through the trees, brushing against the windows like a restless thought that won't settle. Jack stands by the fireplace now, staring into the dying embers. The faint orange light flickers against his face, tracing the lines of time and loss carved deep into his features. He hasn't turned on a single light, just lets the firelight paint his silhouette across the walls. Still as a statue, but inside, his mind is anything but still. He reaches for an old photo frame resting on the mantel. The glass catches the glow of the fire, and for a second, the past flickers to life. It's a candid shot from the A Few Good Men set. Rob's mid-laugh, head thrown back, eyes lit with that unshakable optimism that used to fill every room he walked into. Jack stares at it for a long time, his thumb brushing lightly over the corner of the frame. The fire pops quietly behind him, and the sound feels almost like a heartbeat. In that dim, quiet room above the canyon, there's no Hollywood magic, no cameras, no scripts, no scenes to redo. Just a man, a memory, and the ghosts that won't let go. And somewhere outside, hidden in the shadows of Mulholland Drive, the silence breathes. Not empty, not cold, but alive with the truth that's finally been spoken. Jack's right beside him in the picture. Mid-smirk, eyes full of mischief, both men frozen in a moment that feels like another lifetime. He studies the photo for a long time before muttering under his breath, "You always said stories could save people." His voice trembles just enough to betray the emotion beneath. "Guess you never thought yours would end like this." The words land heavy, pressing down like the weight of years that never really passed. He sets the frame back on the mantel carefully, almost reverently, like he's afraid to disturb the memory it holds. The fire behind him has faded to faint orange coals, flickering weakly in the quiet. Then his phone buzzes, a rare sound in a house that's gotten used to silence. Jack hesitates before picking it up. The screen glows against the dim light. Aaron Sorkin, just 5 words. "You did the right thing." Jack stares at the screen, unmoving. The phrase doesn't feel comforting. It feels foreign, almost cruel. The right thing. His eyes narrow. "What's right?" he mutters softly. "When the truth burns everyone it touches." He sets the phone down and walks slowly toward the window. Below him, the city stretches out in every direction. Endless lights pulsing like a heartbeat that doesn't know how to stop. He pulls a cigarette from his pocket, lights it, and exhales slowly. The smoke curls up into the night air, twisting and fading, joining the shadows that have followed him his whole life. Somewhere far off, a coyote howls. that long, lonely cry that slices through the quiet canyon air. Jack pauses, his lips curling into the faintest, saddest smile. You'd probably write this scene better, Rob. He whispers to the night. His voice breaks slightly at the end. He exhales again, the smoke drifting out the open window toward the canyon, carrying with it the last breath of a story too heavy to ever really end. The silence settles again, not empty this time, but knowing, heavy. The kind that understands what's been said and what can never be unsaid. Outside, the first light of morning creeps in, slow, golden, and unforgiving. It cuts through the haze like truth slicing through denial, sharp, impossible to avoid. The city below begins to wake, unaware of the ghosts watching from above. Jack's still awake, too. The ashtray beside him is full, the coffee beside it gone cold. The same photo of Rob sits on the table, the smile frozen forever, a ghost that refuses to leave. For the first time in years, Jack looks tired, not movie star tired, not the kind you can fix with makeup and sunglasses, but bone tired, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. The night's confessions hang in the air like smoke, curling into every corner of the room, refusing to fade. Then, a soft knock breaks the quiet. The door creaks open slightly. His housekeeper, Maria, steps in cautiously, holding the morning paper in one hand. "Mr. Nicholson," she says gently. Jack turns his head slightly, the dawn light catching the edge of his face. The look in his eyes is unreadable, somewhere between exhaustion and peace. The city hums beneath him, the canyon still whispering. The silence lingers, alive, as if even it knows the story isn't really over. "Mr. Nicholson?" Maria says gently from the doorway. "You want me to leave it here?" Jack doesn't turn around, just nods. She sets the morning paper down on the table and slips out quietly, her footsteps fading into the background hum of the waking city. Jack's eyes drift toward the paper. The headline catches him immediately. "Nick Reiner trial date confirmed." He exhales through his nose, slow and heavy, scanning the bold letters. Beneath the headline, there's a photo. Nick in court, blank-faced, swallowed up by a suit that looks too big on him. Jack stares at it for a long time. His expression doesn't change, but his voice, when it finally comes, is soft, almost tender. "He looks like a kid," he mutters, "just a lost kid." There's no anger in his tone, just exhaustion, the kind that settles deep and never really leaves. He folds the paper slowly, neatly, and sets it aside, almost like refusing to give it power. "You know," he says to no one in particular,
that I was all I was, and so were all the people I was working with, trying to do their best under the circumstances. And that's really all you need as a developing actor, is just to be trying to do it well.
"This town's built on stories about redemption, second chances, dramatic turnarounds." He trails off for a second, the words dragging. "But real life, it doesn't hand out rewrites." He turns, the floorboards creaking under his steps as he walks toward the kitchen. The morning light floods the room, sharp and golden, slicing through the haze. He pours himself another cup of cold coffee, what's left in the pot from last night. The mug trembles slightly in his hand, just enough to betray the weight he's been carrying. Out the window, the city looks brand new, bright, clean, pretending nothing ever happened, the illusion of renewal. Jack takes a slow sip, eyes locked on the skyline, voice low and thoughtful. "If there's any justice left in this town," he murmurs, maybe to Rob, maybe just to himself, "it's in the truth, even when it hurts." The sunlight hits him full on now, wrapping him in its harsh golden glare. It doesn't soften anything, it just exposes it. Every line, every scar, every story written on his face. Jack sets the mug down and straightens his shoulders, breathing deep, like a man about to step into another scene he doesn't want, but knows he has to play. The silence holds, heavy but alive. Not grief anymore, but something like resolve. Outside, Los Angeles wakes up beneath him. The hum builds. Gardeners trimming hedges, delivery trucks rumbling along the winding roads, a faint echo of someone's music drifting up from the hills. By noon, the canyon is alive again, the world moving on, pretending not to notice the ghosts watching quietly from above. And in that quiet kitchen on Mulholland Drive, Jack stands still, caught between the past that won't fade and a day that insists on beginning anyway. The world outside has already moved on. Headlines replaced, cameras chasing a new story. But Jack hasn't. He paces the length of his living room, slow and deliberate, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. Every few steps he pauses by the window, staring out at the sprawl below, as if the city might somehow offer him an answer. It never does. It never will. The newspaper still lies open on the table, its edges curling in the morning light. Another headline catches his eye now. Documentary in development, The Reiner Legacy. Jack lets out a short, bitter laugh. Of course, he mutters. Hollywood never lets a tragedy rest. It packages it, scores it, and sells it right back to you in 4K. He shakes his head, the sound in his throat halfway between a sigh and a scoff. They'll make it look beautiful, too. The lighting, the music, the tears, every frame crafted like poetry. He flicks the ash into the tray, eyes narrowing. But they'll never capture what it felt like, the silence, the weight, the parts no one saw. He walks over to a shelf lined with dusty scripts, old awards, and fading photographs. His fingers trail along the spines, over titles carved into history. Chinatown, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, A Few Good Men. Each name, each image, feels like an echo, a reminder of a life built on turning pain into art. We used to believe movies could make people see, he murmurs, barely audible. But maybe all they ever did was help them forget. His hand stops at a framed A Few Good Men poster, the same fierce stare, the same line that became bigger than the film itself. Jack stares at it for a long time, the corners of his mouth tightening into something between a smirk and a frown. He whispers, "You can't handle the truth." Then, almost to himself, "You were right, Rob. Nobody really can." For a long moment, he just stands there, the smoke curling around him like fog. Then he stubs out the cigarette, grabs his worn leather jacket from the back of the chair, and slips it on. There's stiffness in his movements, the weight of age, of memories. But there's also something else now. Resolve. The kind of resolve that only comes when a man decides he's done hiding. He walks to the door, his shadow stretching long across the floor in the midday light. His hand lingers on the doorknob for a second, the air around him humming with quiet tension. Then he exhales, turns the key, and locks the door behind him. Outside, the wind moves through the canyon again. The same road, the same city, but it feels different now. Jack steps into the sunlight, not looking back, the glow catching in his hair as the door clicks shut. The silence that follows isn't empty anymore. It's alive, filled with the quiet echo of truth finally faced. The house stays still, frozen in time, holding every word, every confession, every regret that ever filled its walls. The wind slips through the canyon again, brushing past the windows and catching the ash from the tray, scattering it across the floor like fading memories rolling down the hill. Then from outside, a sound breaks the silence, the low, guttural roar of Jack's car engine. That old defiant growl cuts through the quiet like a heartbeat coming back to life. The story isn't over, not yet. It's just shifting scenes. The afternoon sun hangs heavy over Sunset Boulevard, that golden hour when the city glows just right, pretending it's still full of dreams. Jack's car, a classic, worn but proud, crawls through the traffic like an aging lion wandering through its old territory. The chrome catches the light, the radio hums low, and every turn feels familiar in the most painful way.
Nick was living in his family's guest house at the time. He was found late Sunday afternoon by his sister, Romy. Both parents were discovered having been stabbed.
Every street corner, every billboard, every flash of a marquee feels like a ghost of what used to be. He drives past the old CAA building, a flash of nostalgia, a ghost of handshakes, and movie deals long gone. Then the restaurant where he and Rob once toasted over a contract, both laughing like the future would never run out. He passes the theater where they'd sat side by side at premieres, the crowd roaring, cameras flashing, their names glowing on the marquee. The world outside looks the same, But to Jack, it's all haunted now. Every block carries a memory, and every memory carries a sting. Finally, he turns off the main drag and pulls into a quiet back lot behind Cantor's Deli, one of the few places left in Hollywood that hasn't been polished or rebranded into oblivion. The neon sign flickers lazily overhead, the same way it did decades ago. Inside, the air smells like old coffee and pickles, that unmistakable comfort that only time can season. The booths are cracked, the counters sticky, and the hum of conversation feels like a heartbeat from a gentler time. The waitress spots him almost instantly, but she doesn't make a scene. No photos, no gasp, no, "Oh my God, it's him." Just a small nod, the kind that says, "I know who you are, but I'll let you be." Jack nods back, appreciative, and slides into a booth near the back, his usual spot, if anyone was paying attention. He orders black coffee and a pastrami on rye, out of habit more than hunger. When the plate and mug arrive, he barely touches either. The coffee goes cold, the sandwich sits untouched. Instead, Jack just leans back, staring at the framed photos on the wall, black and white snapshots of legends, long gone, frozen mid-laugh or mid-line. He studies them quietly, his reflection faint in the glass, one more face among ghosts. For a moment, he almost smiles. The city outside keeps buzzing, the world keeps spinning, and yet here he sits, still chasing the echoes of the people and stories that once made it all feel alive. Faces stare down from the walls, actors, directors, musicians, all gone or long forgotten. Jack studies them, his expression unreadable. "Whole town's a museum," he mutters, half to himself, except no one remembers what the exhibits were for. His voice trails off, carried away by the low hum of the diner. At the next booth, a young filmmaker leans in close to his friend, whispering, "That's Jack Nicholson." The friend glances over, eyes wide for half a second, then looks away fast, pretending he didn't see. Jack catches it, a flicker of amusement breaking through his tired eyes. He smirks faintly. "Don't worry, kid," he says under his breath. "I'm just another ghost." The moment fades. Then, buzz. His phone vibrates on the table, the sound sharp against the diner's soft chatter. Another message from Aaron Sorkin. Jack picks it up, squinting at the screen. "They want me to consult on the documentary. Should I?" Jack stares at it for a long time. His thumb hovers over the screen, frozen between instinct and hesitation. The coffee beside him has gone cold, and the sun outside is beginning to dip, streaking the city with gold and red. Finally, he types back just one word: "Yes." He sets the phone down and leans back in the booth, exhaling slow. For the first time in days, his shoulders eased just slightly. Maybe, he thinks, some stories have to keep being told, not to exploit, not to sensationalize, but to remember. Outside, the sunlight fades, spilling warmth across the cracked pavement and glinting off passing cars. Jack finishes what's left of his coffee, tosses a few bills on the table, and stands. His movements are slower than they used to be, but steadier. He looks older, sure, but lighter, too. Like a man who's finally learned that surviving isn't the same as forgetting. He steps out of Cantor's into the fading light, the evening air soft and humming with the city's rhythm. Los Angeles is shifting again, that hour between day and night where everything feels both alive and unreal. Jack squints toward the horizon, hands in his jacket pockets, and takes a deep breath. Then he moves. The dusk drapes itself over the city like a slow, deliberate curtain. The heat begins to ease. Streetlights blink on one by one, turning the sprawl into a sea of amber and shadow. The glare of day gives way to something softer, lonelier, the kind of glow only this city can make. Jack slides behind the wheel of his car, the leather creaking as the engine rumbles to life. He pulls away from the curb and lets the road take him. No destination, no plan. The canyon roads twist and climb around him, curling like a memory he can't quite shake. The headlights carve thin lines through the dark, the city lights shrinking behind him. Out here, it's just the hum of the tires, the whisper of wind through the trees, and the low, steady voice in his head asking the question that never really leaves. Are you escaping something or chasing it? He rolls the window down, letting the wind whip through the car, carrying the scent of dry brush, asphalt and faint jasmine that drifts up from the canyon floor. For a brief moment, it almost feels peaceful, the kind of quiet that belongs to the hills, not the city. Then the radio crackles, static at first, then a voice. The news. Jack's grip tightens on the steering wheel as the anchor starts listing names, details, legacies, Rob's name among them. The trial approaches, the voice drones. The tragic legacy of a Hollywood family. Jack's jaw tightens. He snaps the dial off with a harsh click. They just won't let him rest, he mutters. His voice is low, rough, edged with something between anger and exhaustion. He drives a little further, then pulls over at one of the canyon overlooks, a quiet stretch of road where the world feels suspended. It's the same spot he and Rob used to come to after late shoots, just two friends trying to shake off the weight of long days, talking about everything and nothing. The view is breathtaking. Below him, the city spreads endlessly, a sea of lights pulsing toward the ocean, alive and indifferent. Jack steps out of the car, the night air cool against his skin, and leans against the railing. The wind hums softly through the brush, whispering the kind of peace that never lasts. I remember the first time we came up here, he says softly, as if Rob might still be standing beside him. You said this city looked like a promise. He smiles faintly, and I said it looked like a trap. He lets out a low, dry laugh. Guess we were both right, huh? The sound fades into the night, rough, tired, but real. Somewhere behind him, another car pulls in. Headlights wash over the overlook before dimming. A young couple steps out, laughing. The kind of carefree laughter Jack hasn't heard in a long time. They hold each other close, snapping selfies against the glittering skyline, their faces glowing in the phone light. Jack watches them for a moment, a flicker of envy crossing his face. Envy and something gentler. Nostalgia, a memory of when life still felt wide open. Don't lose that, he murmurs under his breath, his voice barely above the wind. That innocence, that glow. Once it's gone, this town eats you alive. The couple climbs back into their car, the laughter fading as they drive off down the winding road, leaving Jack alone again with the view, and the low, eternal hum of Los Angeles breathing beneath him. He pulls a cigarette from his pocket, lights it, and for a moment the flame cuts through the darkness, a small, stubborn glow. It flickers across his face, revealing the lines, the wear, and that faint, unmistakable glint of defiance still burning behind his eyes. And he inhales slowly, the smoke curling around him like memory, and for the first time in days, he smiles. Not the guarded one, not the polite one, but a real, quiet smile. This time you were right about one thing, Rob, he says to the night, voice soft but sure.
You look at him with his head kind of shaved, and I don't know if that's what he looked like, but he looks like he's got a screw, or an evil screw. So he was 32 years old. He was at a holiday party hosted by Conan O'Brien.
We did all right. He exhales, watching the smoke drift out over the canyon, blending with the night air, rising, fading, and finally disappearing into the city's endless light. The night swallows everything, dissolving into the same darkness that once held their dreams. It settles heavy over the canyon, thick and alive, the kind of dark that hums, that listens. The breeze moves like a whisper through the brush. Jack stays at the overlook longer than he means to, standing still as the ember of his cigarette pulses faintly, a heartbeat glowing against the black. Below him, the city flickers, a sea of artificial stars built by people still chasing the same dream, still pretending it can't break them. He stares at it for a long moment, face half lit by that fading glow, before flicking the cigarette away. It arcs through the air, then tumbles down the slope and vanishes into the night. That's it, he murmurs. That's all any of us do. He watches the smoke trail disappear, the words coming out soft, almost kind, burn bright, then disappear. There's no bitterness now, just quiet understanding, maybe even acceptance. Jack turns to head back to his car, his footsteps slow, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The air feels colder now, sharper, the kind of chill that wakes you up whether you want it to or not. He opens the car door, then stops. The phone buzzes again, lighting up the dark interior, a number he doesn't recognize. For a moment, he thinks about letting it ring out, but something makes him answer. Hello? A woman's voice comes through, calm, polished, professional. Mr. Nicholson, this is Sarah Goldman from Variety. We heard you recently spoke about Rob Reiner. Would you be open to... Jack cuts her off, not harshly, but firm. No interviews, no quotes. That story's been told. There's a pause on the other end. The sound of hesitation, of someone not ready to take no for an answer. But Mr. Nicholson, people would want to... People, he interrupts, his voice hardening, want to turn pain into entertainment. He exhales sharply, the sound of finality in it. I'm done feeding that. He ends the call. For a moment, he just stands there in the quiet, staring at the phone like it's something foreign, like he can't remember why he ever let it hold so much power. Then he powers it off completely, tosses it onto the passenger seat, and closes the door with a soft click. The engine growls to life, headlights slicing through the dark like twin blades. He starts winding his way down the hill, the radio off, the road empty. The only sound is the steady hum of the tires and the faint whistle of wind cutting through the canyons. Halfway down, he slows, instinct more than thought, as he passes a familiar curve. Rob's old street. The gate is closed now, the house beyond it dark and silent. The kind of silence that never really fades. Jack's hands tighten on the steering wheel. For a heartbeat, he thinks about stopping, just pulling over, sitting there, maybe saying something into the quiet. But he doesn't. He can't. Instead, he presses gently on gas. The car rolls forward, the headlights brushing over the gate one last time before it disappears into the darkness behind him. The road opens up ahead, just long, winding, and empty, leading him back toward a city still glowing, still pretending, still dreaming. And behind him, somewhere high above in the canyon, the silence lingers, heavy, sacred, and unbroken. Some ghosts are better left where they sleep. At the bottom of the hill, Jack pulls over beside a small roadside bar, the kind of place time forgot. The neon sign hums and flickers, half the letters burned out, painting the pavement in a tired red glow. Inside, a few locals sit hunched over their drinks, their faces softened by the dim light and the years. Jack steps in without fanfare. No one gasps, no whispers trail behind him. Just the quiet acknowledgement of another man coming in from the night. He slides onto a stool and orders simply, whiskey. Neat. The bartender recognizes him, of course. Everyone always does. But he doesn't say a word. Just nods once, pours the drink, and slides the glass across the counter. The sound of the ice settling in the glass feels like punctuation at the end of a long sentence. Jack raises it slightly, a subtle toast. To Rob, he says under his breath. Then, after a moment, adds softly, to the dreamers who still believe the light's worth chasing. He takes a slow sip. The liquor burns all the way down. Sharp, honest, familiar. The jukebox hums in the background, playing some old blues tune that's probably been looping here for decades. For just a heartbeat, the weight on his shoulders feels lighter. Not gone, never gone, but easier to carry. Outside, the night rolls on, patient, infinite, like it's waiting for whatever story comes next. When morning finally arrives, it does so quietly. The canyon is bathed in silver mist, soft and still. Jack wakes in his chair, the half-empty whiskey glass sitting on the table beside him, catching the early light. The sun creeps through the windows, painting the room gold and pale, like the world itself has taken a deep, healing breath. He stands, joints stiff but steady, and steps out onto the deck with a steaming mug of coffee in hand. The air smells clean after the long night, fresh, crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and sun-warmed earth. Below him, Los Angeles stretches wide, glimmering even through the haze. A city that refuses to stop shining, no matter how dark its stories get. The hum of traffic is distant, softened by the morning air, like the world is easing back into motion. For the first time in what feels like forever, Jack isn't running from the past. He isn't trying to rewrite it either. He's just letting it be. The laughter, the loss, the ghosts, all of it. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out the old photo again. The one from A Few Good Men. Rob's in it, laughing, head thrown back, full of life and belief. Jack studies it for a long moment, the corners of his mouth twitching into a faint, wistful smile. The wind stirs gently around him. lifting the edges of the photo like it's trying to take it away. But he holds it firm, eyes locked on the memory. The city glows beneath him, the same as it always has. Flawed, fragile, and still somehow beautiful. For once, that's enough. Jack smiles faintly, the kind of smile that carries both ache and warmth. "You'd hate all the noise, buddy," he says softly, his voice brushing the edge of a sigh. "But maybe it's good. They're still talking about you. Means you mattered." The wind stirs again, tugging at the photo's corners. Jack doesn't fight it this time. He just watches as it slips from his fingers, drifting up for a brief second before catching the sunlight and fluttering off the deck down into the canyon below. For a heartbeat, it gleams like a spark. Then it's gone. A fitting goodbye. Jack takes one last drag from his cigarette, the ember glowing faintly before fading into the wind.
Rob Reiner and Nick got into a, quote, very loud argument. His behavior at Conan's house alarmed the guests because it was so bizarre. One of the guests recalled Rob Reiner telling his son his behavior was inappropriate.
The smoke rises and disappears into the pale sky, dissolving into everything and nothing all at once. "You always said every story needs an ending," he murmurs. "Guess this one finally got one." He flicks away what's left of the cigarette, turns back toward the house, and steps inside. The door closes softly behind him. No drama, no final chord, just quiet. The kind of quiet that finally feels earned. Outside, the city hums beneath the morning light. The world keeps spinning. And that old, haunting silence on Mulholland Drive, the silence that once felt unbearable, now carries peace instead of pain. It's not the ending anyone dreamed of, but it's an ending that feels true. Because in the end, legacies aren't built from tragedy. They're built from love, from laughter, from the light that refuses to die, even when everything else fades. Somewhere out there, in the endless sprawl of Los Angeles, the story of Rob Reiner, Michelle, and the friend who finally broke his silence still lives on. Not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a reminder that even in a city built on illusions, some truths are too human to fade. The sun climbs higher, painting the canyon gold. The air carries the faint hum of life returning, the city waking, dreaming again. Jack's house stands still above it all, holding its ghosts quietly, peacefully. And with that, the curtain falls. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful Hollywood stories like this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you.